Okay, let's call this meeting to order. Staff, roll call.
Chair Jabs, we do not have a quorum yet. We actually need 5 members.
Oh.
It's 5.
Okay, well then I guess we will hold tight for a couple
So
minutes.
we'll wait a couple minutes.
Let's
We
see.
should have a quorum.
Okay.
Our notification indicated that we would.
Okay, excellent. Okay, we'll hold tight for about 5 minutes then. Okay, now we have a quorum. So now we'll call the meeting to order. Okay, staff, roll call.
Attendance noted.
Okay, thank you. Approval of the minutes from October 28th, the regular planning commission meeting. So moved. Okay, is there a second? Second. Okay, motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Okay. This is an opportunity, if there's anyone in the audience that needs to address the commission, items not on the agenda. Doesn't look like anyone, so we can move on to the first item on the agenda. And that's a public hearing, 6330 and 6400 Lindale Avenue, Lindale Gardens formerly. Amend the planned unit development request to increase allowable restaurant space at the future Lindale Gardens redevelopment site. Staff?
Thank you. In March and June of this year, the City Council approved redevelopment plans for the Lindale Garden Center. Those plans included a 151-unit apartment building, 25,000 square feet of a co-op brochure, and 11,600 square feet of additional retail space. Of that retail space, up to 2,600 square feet was requested for restaurant use. Staff supported the proposed use allocations based on an independent parking study submitted by the applicant and our own evaluation. As part of that review, staff indicated that parking could be near full capacity during the Wednesday farmers markets, and that no additional events should be permitted without an approved event parking plan. Both the original independent parking study and a spreadsheet of the city parking standards are attached to your staff report. The applicant, the Cornerstone Group, is requesting an amendment to the PUD that would allow up to 10,000 square feet of restaurant space within the development. In support, they've submitted an updated parking analysis. The study estimates peak parking demand on weekdays to be approximately 86% of the available parking capacity and 92% of capacity on weekends. The submitted study anticipates that those percentages would calculate to 57 and 32 parking spaces available on non-farmers market weekdays and weekends, respectively. Those parking spaces would be spread throughout the development, including the parking area south of the Lakewinds Co-op. During the farmers market, it's anticipated that there would be roughly 24, 25 parking spaces of the 402 that are part of the entire development. As was done for the previous request, staff conducted an analysis of the need based on our own code requirements, and staff's analysis, as we did last time, removes the 20 parking spaces that are dedicated to the townhomes. It also removes those units from the calculation because those parking spaces are not available for sharing. Based on code requirements, an increase in restaurant space to 10,000 square feet would result in a standard surplus of 0 parking spaces on the northern half of the development and an anticipated surplus in the southern half, the co-op side, of 26 stalls. Staff also analyzed parking based on a scenario in which 7,000 square feet would be available for restaurant space, and we asked the developer to do the same. In this scenario, the consultant estimated that peak parking demand on weekdays would decrease from 86% of capacity to 83% of capacity. That works out to an increase from 57 to 72 available parking stalls throughout the development. And on weekends, peak was estimated to decrease from 92% of capacity to 86%, an increase from 32 parking stalls to 59 surplus parking stalls. An analysis based on our code requirements estimates a surplus of 16 stalls on the northern half of the development. That's equivalent to 84% of capacity. And it anticipated that the southern half would remain the same with 26 stalls. So in total, 42 of the 401 parking stalls would be available on non-farmers market days at the peak. Pardon me. And just for reference, an industry rule of thumb here on what is perceived to be a full parking lot is 90% of capacity. When the parking lot is 90% full, the general public perceives that to be full. So the purpose of the zoning code, as you all know, is to foster harmonious relationships between land uses and protect adjacent uses from spillover effects, undue spillover effects from neighboring properties. As part of that, these standards are written based on accepted community norms. And so the accepted community norms of Richfield might be different than the accepted community norms of Burnsville or of downtown Minneapolis. And so that's something to take into account here as we look at these parking capacity studies. And the other thing to keep in mind here is that, again, these parking numbers are estimates. Staff makes a best guess. The Institute of Transportation Engineers, we make best guesses on the amount of parking that will be shared, the amount of parking that will be used, when those peak times will be, and come up with a range of what parking is anticipated. You will recall, many of you have brought up, that recent developments in Richfield have been very successful, more successful than anticipated. And so we have heard some complaints about available parking. So when staff was evaluating this, we were trying to take into consideration those concerns that we've heard from the community, as well as what we truly anticipate the need at this development will be. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. The applicant is here as well. And all of those numbers are included in your packet if you'd like to review those some more.
Okay, I just, one question I'd like to ask before we proceed with the public hearing is, you decided on 7,000. What was the rationale for that 7,000?
We discussed it with the developer a little bit. They anticipate that a larger full-service restaurant will be roughly 5,000 to 5,500 square feet. And we looked at how they had tentatively divided their tenant spaces and added on one additional space, it was just under, actually staff had initially proposed 6,500, and when you add two tenant spaces together, it was about 6,800. And so to give a little wiggle room, we calculated at 7,000. Those numbers still seemed within acceptable ranges to us. So that's how we.
Any other questions of staff? Okay. Do you want to add anything to the comments? This is a public hearing at this point, so if you would. Make sure you state your name. Okay.
And there we go. I'm Beth Piper. I'm the Director of Development for the Cornerstone Group. Thank you for having us here again tonight to talk to you about this. I think Melissa did a great job of presenting the information, so I won't add too much to that. The one thing that I did want to let you know is that we have what's called a letter of intent out to a prospective restaurant tenant right now, and we are waiting to sign with them until we have this matter resolved, because it's very important to them that they know that they are going to fit in the space. And it's a great local restaurateur who's very excited about the site and the vision that we've built together with you for this town center. So
Okay,
I guess the only other thing I would like to add is our request is for 10,000. We do for the entire 10,000 to be allowed to be restaurant. We don't necessarily anticipate that all of the space would be filled by restaurant, but we would like the flexibility to be able to negotiate with other users that qualify under the code as restaurant but don't really use seating space, like an ice cream shop, which isn't differentiated in the code separate than a seated restaurant, but where the patron turnover, even if people are coming and sitting, is for a much shorter period of time. Same with coffee shops, where we know that the peak demand is generally complete by 11 a.m. So we've asked for the entire 10,000 to be considered, and I have worked with Melissa to look at the 7,000 as well.
okay, and with the 7,000, is that still, I sense that, does it fit your needs, first of all, for this restaurant that you're negotiating with?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And I assume since you worked with Melissa that you also are pretty comfortable that if 7,000 were the only thing that was approved, you would be okay with it per se and be able to work with it?
We would work with it. It's not our first choice, but it is, we felt like in discussing it with Melissa and really looking at the layout of the building, we would be agreeable to that. But again, we would prefer to see the entire 10,000 be allowed. Not that we'll do that necessarily, but then we wouldn't need to come back before you in the case that we fill the rest of the building with coffee and ice cream.
Okay. Other questions? Tom?
My ended, and I think the uses of parking spaces and so on, as we've all discussed, some businesses that come in are a little more successful than others. I would hope that you would be wildly successful, but it's kind of open-ended right now as to the nature of the restaurant, the nature of what you want to fill in the other 3,000 square feet. Without being more specific, it's kind of hard to assess the risk of what might happen with parking. We're already at a point where you're predicting near full capacity of the parking spaces, but more specificity. I think it's kind of difficult, and you're in a position, of course, I'm sure you don't want to reveal who. I understand that, but asking us to do 7,000 square feet, but then also giving a carte blanche approval for another 3,000, I'm kind of leery of doing that.
I guess there's one other piece that I forgot to point out. I don't know if we have the overhead for
The technician will turn it on. There we go.
so. So the retail space that we're talking about.
Could you make sure you're talking into the microphone, please?
So the retail space that we're talking about is this space here. This is the Lake Winds Natural Food Store here and their parking lot. We still own an additional piece of land to the south of Lake Winds that we call Lot 4 because that's the platted lot number. And as part of a study that we did to determine how we would park for events and also the potential of a possible future partnership with the city and perhaps putting a municipal ramp there. No one's committed to this. I understand it was just a study. But we did lay out how many parking spaces would fit on that site. This shows that additional lot. This was when we laid it out for a ramp, so there's some stairs and elevators that won't be there initially. So just as surface parking, that lot can park an additional 46 cars. So it's also just something to keep in mind that until we have determined that we don't have any issues with parking, we are committed to not developing that lot because we want to make sure that we don't have any issues with parking at the site. Just another thing for you guys to consider.
I guess I ask a question of staff relative to that piece. How does that play into the equation that you put together?
Well, frankly, it doesn't so much. That lot has been indicated as a possibility for overflow parking during events, and it'll be sodded, and that area will be grass. That's been counted in the stormwater calculations, and that's the way that we see it now because that is the proposal before us. We have talked extensively through this process about if there is a need for additional parking, how could they possibly utilize Lot 4? But the proposal tonight is for 10,000, the application is for 10,000 square feet without paving this additional lot. It would not be, they would have to be proposing also to stripe and meet parking lot requirements and all of those other things along with it for us to actually count those spaces toward this parking requirement.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Susan?
Will people have an access to the restaurants through, if they go through the co-op, or are they going to have to walk around? Or, so I'm just thinking about human nature and trying to find that parking spot in the front.
Right.
Or if they know if they can go through the co-op. Or.
Right. I think likely what we would do would be some sort of valet service, or there isn't access through the building, but there are sidewalks and
Okay.
pedestrian access all the way around the building.
Okay, so they could walk. So that'll be like a covered, well-kept.
Not covered, but it'll be
So it'll be cleaned off in the
maintained and
winter
cleared
all
and
that.
plowed
Okay.
and yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I can just imagine. I'm just recently, I've been driving over by where the new Whole Foods is over on France,
Mhm.
our own Target, and the parking. I mean, it gets pretty cutthroat in those parking lots, and I'm just thinking about if people are trying to get there in some of those spots, if they could have. They know they could walk through the co-op, but if you're saying that there is not going to be any access, then it's just, to me, it just seems like it could be kind of treacherous. But I really would like to see that other parking lot then for, people that can walk further and can get down to the parking lot. Because we struggle so hard with the other Cornerstone development down at 76th and Lindale with parking. We struggle at Gramercy. We've struggled with parking. That seems to keeps coming back so often. And I just don't want to put us into that situation. I mean, it's not good for any of us because we'll be up for criticism. You'll be up for criticism if people can't find a place to park. So I really, if we go ahead and approve it just for the 7,000. Unless you really are serious about, expanding that parking area further down. But it's, when it's that tight, and like the staff said, people perceive a full parking lot when it's only 90%, because if you see lots of cars, you're not even going to go in, which is also bad for business and everything. So really would... really like to keep it at 7,000 just for that reason, because it can get pretty tight in there, and there's not a lot of space in there, and it gets tough. I've witnessed and have been victim of some of the parking lot issues in some of these newer developments because, you know, they're following the standards, but then there's also issues out there with elderly drivers, people that are not taking their time, and so anyway, that's my take on it. But we really do need plenty of parking until we become much more of a transit community. We really have to be careful with the parking.
Tom?
Beth, what kind of an algorithm are you using to estimate seat time? How, you know, you're talking about a restaurant, people coming in, how long are they going to stay? And how confident are we in that kind of a figure that they're not going to come in and stay longer than right now you might think?
So we actually don't calculate that. We had a third party that we hired to look at the parking demand, and that was a report that was done by Kimley Horn Associates, an engineering firm that specializes in this. So I don't know what algorithm they use, but maybe Melissa can speak to that. You look like you're
Well, sure. I'll just jump in a little bit. The Kimley Horn is using the national standards, which are developed by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. It's the IT parking generation standards. And their averages calculated for a number of different types of restaurant, and they're generally divided by the turnover time. Excuse me. So higher end restaurants where they expect patrons to linger and those sorts of things, they use one calculation. Things like McDonald's, they use another. But it's all based on these turnover rates, and they are national averages. So there is some variation there. And when you look at the full studies, you know, there's a standard deviation, and it's a range. It's not, you know, it's simplified down to this fact where there are going to be 24 vacant spots. Well, it's going to be around there,
Okay.
but that's how they do it.
Is this a restaurant that eventually you would anticipate applying for some sort of an alcohol license, beer and wine, full
Yes.
liquor license? Okay.
Yes.
And that, I assume, is also taken into account. Would it be a type of business that serving alcohol would then also have a happy hour?
I don't know about their happy hour schedule, but I do know that they would be applying for a liquor license. I think for us, the big thing that the reason for asking for 10,000 is less about the seated restaurant and maybe there's some language that we could add to it to differentiate between restaurant types. I think the struggle for us is that there is no differentiation between restaurant types. So where we likely are not going to or don't want to fill the entire 10,000 square feet with restaurants that have long seat times, you know, full liquor licenses. I think that the struggle for us is our ability to talk to somebody like an ice cream shop and have them evaluated the same way that a seated restaurant is evaluated. And so, or a coffee shop. And Therese Riley, who's our leasing agent with Colliers, is here. And I don't know if she wants to add anything to that, but based on Teresa's experience with other projects and looking at the parking that's available and kind of the usage patterns for some of those smaller restaurants, still that fit in restaurants, the ice cream shop and the coffee shop specifically are the ones that really we're wanting to preserve flexibility for.
Hi, I'm Therese Reiling, and I'm a retail broker with Colliers. I've been doing retail brokerage in the Twin Cities for 20 plus years, so I have some pretty good experience with tenants and parking requirements and who uses a lot of parking spaces and who doesn't. And I would like to build on what Beth has requested in that the request for 10,000 square feet doesn't necessarily mean that we would want to fill it all with 10,000 square feet of sit-down restaurants. Sometimes non-restaurants are heavy parkers too, like if we put in a salon or a dental clinic, their staff plus their customers can take up as much or more time than a sit-down restaurant. So what we'd like to have the flexibility, like Beth requested, is up to 10,000 square feet. That would give us an opportunity to maybe consider an ice cream shop, which would be such a nice complement to the outdoor community nature of the project, like a Sebastian Joe's or something like that, where people come in, they don't really sit, but it's quick turnover. And it would be a nice complement to the project. And then from what I've told in the industry, and this is more on the national tenants like Caribou and Starbucks, but I do know that their their sales peak is often achieved before 11 a.m. in the morning. So they kind of have an opposite schedule for customer draw than a restaurant. And the restaurant that we have that's interested, we've been kind of vetting a whole bunch of different restaurants, and Colleen and Beth's vision is to find a unique restaurant that would be really complementary to the community and really fit in with their desired nature of the project. So to build on organic foods, natural, locally sustained foods. So I just wanted to address that. If they don't really strike me as somebody who would have a happy hour per se. I mean, I think they might serve beer and wine and alcohol, but they're a caliber of a tenant that I think Richfield and the community would just be really excited to have join the project. And I'm happy to answer any other questions about the real estate portion of it.
Tom?
This additional space that is thought you might use for parking, is that space that would ever be conceivably used for something other than parking? In other words, putting retail space or using it for some kind of non-parking use?
Yes. The reason we haven't developed that lot is because we think that it's in a location where we may eventually add additional parcels to it to be developed. I was bringing it up tonight more to show that we have other parking available if we come into a problem area where we've said we're not going to develop this until we know we don't have a parking problem. We still are going to sod it, but we actually may stripe it as well on sod for valet parking, for overflow parking, for event parking in the interim until we have decided what the final development potential of it is. And it is possible that it has the potential that it could be a parking ramp, whether it's a municipal ramp or a privately owned ramp that's wrapped in retail. I didn't print out all of the drawings that we did for looking at that site, but that was one use as well.
Are there any issues with that? The idea of it's a contingent proposition. Could be developed as retail space or some kind of business space that would also require parking. Is your department comfortable with that kind of a risk?
Well, I don't think it's really a question of whether our department is comfortable with it. I think it's a question of whether or not policies are comfortable taking that kind of risk of basing your decision on a proof of parking area, which is fine. If the commission is comfortable with these numbers and is comfortable, believes that the community is comfortable with these numbers, then absolutely 10,000 square feet is on the table. That isn't really the feedback that we've received as of late. I would say as of the last 3 or 4 years, staff has been hit pretty hard with the fact that we are not requiring enough parking at these. And so I think that we are trying to strike this balance between what is acceptable in the community and what is acceptable based on national real estate trends and things like that.
Okay, other questions? Yep, Dennis?
I got a couple questions for you. Have you gotten any indication of other parking in the area from anybody, municipal or otherwise?
Like other parking that's available? I'm not sure. if
that
I
can
understood the
be, you know,
question.
we're excited
Oh,
about your restaurant
yes.
ideas,
Yeah.
but we're hindered by the need for parking and people and driving cars. So
Right.
where are we
So-
gonna put them?
One of the things when we spoke to staff about our initial PUD, and there's some concern about the excitement of making this a town center and the impact of making this a town center. At that time, we went out and talked to a number of different property owners around the building about more specific to event parking than to restaurant parking. But there are a number of businesses that close their doors at 5 p.m. and the parking lots are completely empty. Quest or CenturyLink, whatever they're called now, near the LA Fitness, near the Wellington development, is one of them where their parking lot is completely empty after 5 p.m., which is sort of the demand time of when our events would take place. So we did approach them about being able to use parking spaces that are already built and just sitting empty, and do either shuttle services or pedicabs, make it kind of the fun, make it part of the event to have people park there and come to this was really more in reference to a concert at the time. So we have explored a number of options like that. We've spoken with some of the surrounding buildings like Woodlake Village Shores that already operate shuttle bus services for the residents, and we have an upcoming event, which I should remember to invite you to. December 21st, we're going to have a winter solstice event out at the site like we did last winter. I'm not sure if any of you were there. I know Dennis was there, but a lot of fun. We're going to have music and s'mores and bonfires and shopping and food trucks. And but for that event, we're asking Village Shores Shuttle to pick up from other locations as well. So we believe that there are a number of creative ways, more specifically to the events, to not build parking all over our site, but ease the need for parking. I'm not sure if that really answered your question, but.
No, that helps. And so like utilizing current things. So there's a
Right.
parking ramp that's not too far away. I walk that far every day. So what about, enhancing that through signage or anything?
Yeah, and part of the Lakes at Lindale Master Plan is to create signage that shows people how to get from one place to another throughout the city. And we've been working with Karen and John to make sure that we include appropriate signage on our site. Part of that master plan that is going to come before you soon, I think, is looking at some studies that we help commission for what Lindale Avenue should be between 62nd and 66th. And so you'll be seeing some options for that as well that could change the parking potentially.
That's helpful. So anyway, we're going to consider what's before us. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, look for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Thank you. Okay, well, first of all, say you guys have been up and up, so I think that's a plus. I think that, as far as I'm concerned tonight, though, staff has done a representation that shows the 7,000, and I feel, my personal opinion is that this is about planning. And if we start jumping in and using the space that's out there that doesn't have any lines on it and that kind of stuff as part of the prerequisite for this, we've not done our planning very well. I'd rather see the 7,000 proceed, gives you the option to get going with your restaurant situation, and then look to see how that fits in and how it fills in. Come back and do another planning for us that looks at the rest of the space and puts it in perspective so that, again, staff can have an option to look at it as well as us and make a recommendation that that utilizes the space in a proper position, allows for the proper parking that we need. And I think you brought up some great ideas, the shuttle service, et cetera. All that's got to come into play, though, before I could say, yeah, I'd take the 10,000 and let you do it. Even though you guys have done an exquisite job, I commend you for everything you've done all the way through this. You've been admirable in everything you've done, working with staff and as well as bringing this thing all together. But I think tonight, for me, it puts in a position where I'm at the 7,000, and I'd like to go that route, take the next step, do the planning, and make sure that we come back with something that, that goes there. So that's where I would sit. Okay. Other comments?
I'm sensitive to what you were saying about needing the authority to negotiate with 10,000 square feet. But the nebulous use of that extra 3,000 square feet parking demands, depending on the nature of what you were able to put in, also leads me to conclude that leaving it at 7,000 would be better. But again, I am sensitive to the idea that you would like to have that freedom to negotiate on 10,000 square feet.
Any other comments? Dennis?
So we're all filled up, like that other spot is like the green space, like, is that green space?
Lot 4.
Yeah. Is that figured into the green space calculation technically?
Actually, I don't believe it was calculated into the stormwater, but I would have, because I think they thought it was going to be paved and staff thought it was going to be grass. So it will be grass. It was not counted into the stormwater calculations. However, I think that whole entire site, Lot 4, is still kind of up for grabs. Nobody's really sure.
So all I would
Right.
say is that I would rather have, not to have to lose any parking spaces and then work backwards from there. But okay, so parking and safety is the concern, and not you guys, because yeah, you're capable and able to work this out and move this here, but the worst case scenario, and we've seen it, where all of a sudden something happens and it's sold, or whoever knows what happened, it's crazy, and then it's not you handling it. So I would be fine with your guys' 7,000 compromise.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, hearing none, I'd ask for a motion.
I would move the recommendation.
Now second.
Motion is second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Thank you again. Okay, any new business? Okay, any old business? How about liaison reports? Community services?
Decided to come into line with the Planning Commission and the council and use Sturgis rules of order. And it was discovered in their research that the Planning Commission, the City Council, and I believe the HRA are the only ones in the city that are using Sturgis. Everybody else was still using Robert's rules of order. That was their accomplishment at the last meeting.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, city council, I think that's.
I think it's city council. Not too much. There's we're building a locker room for Minnesota Magicians locker room at the Richfield Ice Arena in the amount of $510,000. So that was the biggest news I heard.
Okay, HRA, I think is Josh. School board?
There was an election, and the three incumbents who were up all lost their seats, and so there will be 3 new members. And the existing school board members got a little update on, processes and timelines for the new superintendent search by the consultancy firm that's handling that.
Thank you. Transportation Commission?
No report.
And Chamber, not here. Anything else?
Just along Penn Avenue, we now have the banners up, but much to the credit of David Gepner, he was able to get the company that provides benches for bus stops to also put a banner with the Penn Central logo and Penn Central name on the back of the benches. So we're doing a little bit each month, trying to brand a neighborhood. And there was recently an article in the Minneapolis paper about the great amount of effort that Edina is putting into naming its neighborhoods. And I think this is a trend that is coming, and I'm proud to think that Richfield is on the cutting edge of that.
I don't know how many of you are on internet with, and I'm in the Jefferson Park neighborhood on the internet because of these neighbors, and they're buying and selling and doing things, and so I think the parks are a natural identifier, and so I think that's kind of fun because now I'm seeing who my neighbors are because there's a lot of new ones on there, but it's kind of interesting to have that, you know, that Jefferson Park, and then they tell you that somebody at some other park is starting up a group, and so it's really pretty interesting. So, but I think that whole identification of a neighborhood is really important to people. It's a sense of place, and so you can have the larger one, or you can have the smaller ones too.
And staff, you had a go ahead.
You know, I
Dennis.
try and give a report on what's going on in the borders of local nearby towns. So just down in Bloomington, you know, the phase 2 at Penn and American. So we already got phase 1. Now there's phase 2. You know about all this? Maybe.
There's a grocery store coming.
What? 108 room extended stay hotel, 9,000 feet of restaurant, 28,000 square feet of grocery. 3.25 acre site, Penn American 2nd edition.
Thank you. And staff, you had some comments you needed to make?
I did. First, I want to remind you all that there's a joint study session tomorrow night to discuss the proposal or the master plan that the Academy of Holy Angels has put together. That study session starts at 6:15 tomorrow night. It is in the Bartholomew room. And I also wanted to let you know that as one of the council's goals this year, was to move to electronic packets, electronic council packets and planning commission packets, et cetera. And we're going to make it by the skin of our teeth. The PCs will be installed mid-December up here along the dais, and your packets will start coming electronically in January.
Good.
We're still discussing how that will be delivered to you, whether your packet will actually be emailed to you or whether you'll just be notified that the link is up and you should go to the website to get the packet. We're still discussing those small logistical items, but starting in 2014, we will no longer print out and deliver packets to you. If you would like printed packets, you will have to do that on your own. Good. So I can try to answer questions right now, but we're having another meeting about it tomorrow. If you have any questions, actually, it might be a good time to get them out so I can address them as part of that meeting, but otherwise we'll keep you updated.
No questions?
Okay.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, I don't think there's anything else, so ask for adjournment.
So moved.
Okay, thank you very much. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, approved. Have a nice Thanksgiving.